The first time I caught my HOA president stealing from me, it was just after midnight, and her white Tesla sat behind my fence sucking the life out of my batteries. I stood there in the dark, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other, thinking, you have got to be kidding me. Because sure, you expect passive-aggressive emails from an HOA president, a warning about trash cans or a complaint about hedge height, but you do not expect to find one literally plugged into your private solar grid like she's entitled to the sun itself. My name's Daniel Harper, and my house isn't just a house to me. It's 10 years of overtime, skipped vacations, careful planning, and wanting one simple thing: control over my own space. The neighborhood looked perfect on paper, the kind of place developers love to photograph. But my lot sat at the far edge of the development where the polished, suburban look started fading into open land. Behind my fence, there was a narrow strip the HOA hadn't turned into anything yet. Just tall grass, weeds, a drainage ditch, and quiet. That quiet was why I bought the place. I work remotely in IT infrastructure, which means my days are graphs, alerts, logs, and fixing problems before they turn ugly. I installed solar panels on the house, then expanded with a ground-mounted array behind the garage. I added a battery bank and a reinforced shed, an inverter, a monitoring panel, the whole setup. During the day, the system generated more than I used. At night, the house ran off stored sunlight. Storm hits the neighborhood, I stay on. Grid flickers, my system isolates. I love the savings, sure, but what I really loved was the independence. And once you spend enough time around graphs, you recognize patterns fast. So when I saw a weird power spike hit my battery bank right around midnight, I noticed. At first, I figured software glitch. Then it happened again. And the next morning, my batteries were lower than they had ever been, even though my house had been dead quiet all night. If there was one person in the neighborhood who acted like everybody else's property was somehow her business, it was Linda Calloway. Linda lived 2 houses down, but she was always drifting past my place with a clipboard and oversized sunglasses, walking slow, like she was inspecting a prison yard instead of a subdivision. She was the HOA president, and she treated that title like elected royalty. The first time she came after me was over the solar panels. She sent a violation letter about unauthorized structural installations affecting community aesthetics, which was funny because my system had been approved before she even moved in. I emailed the paperwork back, the fine vanished, and from then on, she made me a hobby. After that, it was always something. Trash cans visible too long after pickup, the reflectivity of my panels in the afternoon, a light on the shed. And every time she walked by, she looked at my setup the same way people look at something they're not admiring but evaluating. By the third midnight spike, I stopped pretending it was random. That night, I sat in my dark living room with my phone in my hand, watching the monitoring app like it owed me an answer. At 11:58 normal, at 11:59 still normal. Then midnight hit and the graph shot upward so hard it looked like somebody had stabbed the screen. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. The whole neighborhood had that eerie suburban stillness it gets after midnight. The grass was damp and the only sound was the low hum of my inverter shed. Then I saw the cord. The cord ran from the outlet panel on my battery shed across the yard and under a gap beneath the back fence. I followed it with my flashlight, crouched down, and looked through the slats. There sat Linda's white Tesla on the other side, charging port-open adapter, attached my extension cord, plugged straight into it. For a few seconds, I couldn't even move. I checked the app again while I was crouched there, and the numbers made my stomach drop. She wasn't skimming a little extra power. She was draining my battery bank almost as fast as the panels filled it during the day. The next morning, I didn't confront her. I documented everything. Photos of the cord, photos of the gap under the fence, screenshots of the monitoring spikes, video of the Tesla charging, close-ups of the adapter, times, dates, notes. If she was going to act like this was harmless, I wanted enough proof to crush that argument. Then I called my friend Marcus, who's an electrician. He looked at the photos and said, "Daniel, that's not neighbor drama. That's theft, and it's dangerous." He walked me through the risk. Unauthorized connections can damage equipment, create fire hazards, and turn into a liability nightmare if something shorts out. After that, I called the HOA management company. The woman on the line got very quiet, then asked me to send every piece of documentation I had. I also called the police non-emergency line, and the officer told me the same thing Marcus did: keep logs, save everything. That should have been the whole story. It wasn't. 2 days later, I got a knock on my door from Elaine Porter, the HOA treasurer, quiet woman in her late 60s, the kind nobody notices until she speaks and the room gets serious. She held a folder against her chest and said, "I think Linda's been doing more than this." Inside were copies of complaints Linda had quietly buried. A neighbor behind her had mentioned an unexplained outlet tripping. Somebody else had noticed a cord near the easement one weekend. Another resident said Linda had been floating this strange idea that people with solar should share their excess for the good of the community. Linda had been pushing the board to create a new HOA rule that would let the association regulate excess residential solar output in the name of sustainability. In plain English, she was trying to dress theft up as policy. That's when I realized this wasn't just some lazy midnight stunt. She'd been planning around my system for a while. So that night I waited again. Right on schedule, just after midnight, the spike hit. I went outside, followed the orange cord, and pulled it back onto my side of the fence. The hum died instantly. A second later, Linda's porch light snapped on and she came storming toward the fence in a robe, furious. "What do you think you're doing?" she shouted. I held up the cord. "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing." She marched closer. "You can't interfere with my vehicle." "Your vehicle," I said, "is plugged into my batteries on my property without permission." She crossed her arms and scoffed. "You generate more than you use. It's just excess." That line told me everything. In her head, if I wasn't personally using every watt the second it was created, then it didn't really belong to me. "That's not how ownership works, Linda." She gave this little cold laugh. "This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that hurts communities." I remember thinking, this woman is standing in the dark, caught with an extension cord under my fence, and she still thinks she's the reasonable one. "I have video," I told her. "Multiple nights, monitoring logs, photos. The management company has it, the board has it, and Elaine has it." The change in her face was instant. She hadn't expected Elaine. She took a step back and hissed, "You'll regret embarrassing me." And I said as calm as I could, "No, Linda, you embarrassed yourself. I just saved the footage." She spun around and went back inside. The emergency board meeting happened 3 days later, and it was brutal. Linda walked in looking polished, like maybe enough hairspray and posture could turn theft into a misunderstanding. It didn't work. My log showed repeated nighttime drains. My video showed the cord. Marcus submitted a written statement about the hazards. Elaine brought the buried complaints. Then the utility company inspector laid out the numbers Linda had been pulling around 10 kilowatt hours a night for weeks. He explained the code violations, the fire risk, the unauthorized connection, all of it in this flat professional voice that somehow made it worse. Linda tried calling it a misunderstanding. Nobody bought it. Then she tried saying, unused solar energy should benefit the neighborhood, and Elaine leaned back in her chair and said, "Then you should have proposed that before crawling under a fence with an extension cord." That was the moment it died. Linda resigned before the meeting ended. The board fined her for the stolen power code enforcement, required an inspection at her expense, and her little community energy proposal died right there. After that, the whole neighborhood felt different. People stopped lowering their voices when she walked past. Her Tesla still sat in the driveway, spotless as ever. But now it looked ridiculous, less like a status symbol, more like evidence. As for me, the best part wasn't the reimbursement, and it wasn't even watching her lose the title she loved so much. It was the silence. No midnight spike, no sudden battery drain. Just the soft, steady hum of my inverter doing what it was supposed to do. And somewhere in all of that, I learned something that stuck with me harder than I expected. People like Linda rarely start with some huge act of theft. They start with little justifications. He has extra. I need it more. Nobody's really getting hurt. That's how entitlement grows, one excuse at a time, until somebody's standing in a bathrobe at midnight explaining why your work belongs to them. The truth is, rules don't automatically protect good people. Titles definitely don't. What protects you is knowing what's yours, documenting everything, and staying calm long enough to let the truth do its work. Sometimes justice doesn't come with shouting or revenge. Sometimes it comes with records, patience, and one clean moment where a liar runs out of room. Now, when I check my monitoring app before bed, the graph is boring again, and I have never loved boring more. So tell me this. If you found your neighbor secretly charging their car off your private system night after night, would you confront them immediately, or would you do what I did and build the case first? And be honest. Did Linda get exactly what she deserved, or do you think she got off easy? Drop your opinion in the comments, and if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a power-hungry neighbor, or somebody who thought community meant taking what wasn't theirs, tell that story too. I'd really like to know where you draw the line between justice, karma, and payback.